Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. I'm so glad you found me tonight. If you're new to my channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. And if you're a returning viewer, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and be sure to share this video. The more likes helps the video perform at a much higher level. Email any of your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I will leave a link to my email in the description box below, so be sure to do that at the end. Tonight's video is featuring truly terrifying, creepy, unsolved mysteries. So if you're like me, who was a 90s kid, the Unsolved Mysteries show with Robert Stack narrating, terrifying. Sit back and enjoy. The Faces of Belmez. The appearance of strange human faces in Belmez began on August 23, 1971, when Maria Gomez Camara, wife of Juan Pereira and a housemaker, complained that a human face was formed on her concrete kitchen floor. Her husband destroyed the picture with a pickaxe, only to have it reappear on the floor. The mayor of Belmez prohibited the destruction of the image, and instead the concrete floor was cut and taken for a study. For the next 30 years, the Pereira family claimed that faces continued to appear, of both male and female, and of different shapes and sizes. Later, when the floor of the house was dug, it was found to contain the remains of humans. It was speculated that a graveyard existed underneath the home. La Mancha Negra, or the black stain, is a mysterious black substance that has oozed from roads in Caracas, Venezuela. It first appeared in 1986. Since then, this mysterious black goo has caused more than 1,800 people to die in road accidents. After conducting 2 decades of research and spending millions of dollars to identify the substance and its origin. The Pollock twins. In 1957, 2 sisters, Joanna, 11, and Jacqueline, 6, Pollock, were killed in a tragic car accident. A year later, their mother gave birth to twins, Jennifer and Jillian. Then it gets weird. Jennifer, the younger twin, had scars and birthmarks on her body that were identical to Jacqueline's, the younger deceased sister. The twins began to ask for toys that had belonged to the deceased girl's toys they had no knowledge of. They stated one day that they wanted to go to a park they'd never been to before, but Joanna and Jacqueline had. In one instance, their mother watched them play a game in which Jennifer laid on the floor with her head in Jillian's lap, pretended that she was dying. Her sister said, "The blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you." But their parents hadn't discussed the accident with the girls. Ever. This led psychologist Dr. Ian Stevenson to conclude that it was likely the twins were reincarnations of their sisters. Apparently at age 5, the odd behavior stopped, along with any sign that they were connected to their departed sisters. And Jennifer and Jillian grew up as normal, happy kids. Whatever normal is. The Rain Man. For 1 week in 1983, a young man named Don Decker was the center of a series of strange phenomena, which developed after the death of his grandfather. He was said to have acquired control over the surrounding weather to make rains whenever he wanted or wherever he wanted, even if it rained inside a house, a restaurant, and a prison cell. The strange ability makes him famous all over the world with the name of the Rain Man. When dolls age, they tend to look quite creepy. Hairs fall out, color fades, cracks appear, and at times the eyes go missing. It's a natural process that comes with time and neglect, but this doll is different. A couple who had children, one birthday or Christmas, they bought their young daughter a doll. Although the doll had been well played with, it was still in rather good condition when it was placed in the attic and forgotten about. 11 years later, the family was having a clean out of the attic when they stumbled across this rather odd-looking doll. The doll was wrinkled and aged like a person does. though much more rapidly. Therefore, it has led many to believe it to be a haunted living doll. The Devil's Footprints. The Devil's Footprints were a phenomenon that occurred during February of 1855, around the Exe estuary in East and South Devon, England. After a heavy snowfall, trails of hoof-like marks appeared overnight in the snow covering. These footprints, most of which measured about 4 inches long, 3 inches across, between 8 and 16 inches apart, and mostly in a single file, were reported from more than 30 locations across Devon and Dorset. It was spread up to a total distance of 160 kilometers through the houses, rivers, haystacks, snow-covered roofs, high walls, and various sewage pipes. Some people believe that the footprints were the tracks of Satan. Many theories have been put forth, but none of them has ever been able to explain this phenomenon. In 1932, a Canadian fur trapper went to a village near Ankajuni Lake in Canada. He knew this establishment very well, as he would often go there to trade his fur and spend his leisure time. On this trip, when he arrived at the village, he sensed something was wrong there. He found the place to be completely empty and silent, even though there were signs there were people in the village a while ago. He then found a fire that was left burning, with stew still cooking on it. He saw the doors were open and foods out waiting to be prepared. It seemed that hundreds of the villagers had simply vanished into thin air. To this day, there's no proper explanation for this massive disappearance of the village. On September 23rd of 1880, David Lang, a farmer, disappeared in front of his family and friends. He was walking across a field towards them, waving hello. Suddenly, he was gone. The area was searched for months, but nothing was found. The family was very frightened. Though it was a great tragedy for the family, Mrs. Lang refused to move her family away until her husband was found. 7 months later, while their daughter was playing, she heard her father crying for help. She found nothing but a circle of dead grass in the place where he was seen for the last time. She screamed for her mother, and Mrs. Lang ran to her daughter. She could still see the circle of dead grass, but she now couldn't hear her husband. This event really frightened her, and she finally moved her family to another town. The Dilatov Pass Incident. 9 experienced hikers died on the slopes of the Ural Mountains in Russia in 1959. Their bodies were found under mysterious circumstances. The hikers' tents were torn from the inside. Their bodies were broken, shattered, and crushed. They aged rapidly, and their tongues had been removed. No other footprints or animal prints other than their own bare-footed footprints were found in the snow, trailing off into the woods. 2 of their corpses were found only in their undergarments. A massive investigation was conducted, but the investigators still have no idea what happened. I know many of you have already heard of this incident from past videos I've featured or from other scary channels, but if you know anything more about it, feel free to comment in the comment section. Severed feet keep washing up on British Columbia shores. It is not uncommon for bodies to wash up on beaches, but for one beach in British Columbia, severed feet have consistently been floating ashore for the past several years, causing numerous theories. From serial killings to shark attacks to human trafficking to be put forth, but nobody knows exactly why this happens. When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you, the man's voice said on the phone. It wasn't the first such call that Dorothy Jane Scott had received from an unidentified caller, someone whose voice she seemed to recognize but couldn't quite place. But it was perhaps the most unsettling and, tragically, among the most prophetic. Since early in 1980, Scott, a single mother with a 4-year-old son named Sean, had been receiving the threatening calls at her aunt's home in Stanton, California, where she and Sean lived. At times the caller was fawning, professing his love for Scott and making romantic overtures. Otherwise he was vitriolic and threatening, saying that he was going to harm her in unspeakable ways. In both modes, the caller made it clear that he was watching Scott, recounting details of her day-to-day life. The calls unsettled Scott and her family, but no one was quite sure what to do about them, so they went unreported. Then, on the night of May 28, 1980, Scott dropped her son off with her parents in Anaheim so that she could attend a staff meeting where she worked. During the meeting, she noticed that one of her co-workers, Conrad Bostrand, didn't look well. She offered to take him to the hospital. He took her up on the offer, and another co-worker, Pam Head, accompanied them. On the way, Scott stopped off at her parents' house to check on her son, and while there, switched the black scarf she had been wearing for a red one. At the hospital, it was determined that Bostrand had been bitten by a black widow spider. He was treated while Scott and Head waited around until he was ready to return home. According to Head, Scott never left her side during that evening. When Bostrand was released, Scott went out of the hospital parking lot to her car, while Head and Bostrand waited to fill a prescription. When Scott didn't return right away, her two co-workers walked out to the parking lot. There they saw Scott's car speeding away, the headlights blinding them so they couldn't see who was behind the wheel. Initially, Bostrand and Head assumed that some emergency had come up involving Scott's son, but when they still hadn't heard from her a few hours later, they reported her missing. At around 4:30 the following morning, Scott's car, a white Toyota station wagon, was found in an alley in Santa Ana, about 10 miles from the hospital. The car had been set ablaze, but no one was inside. It was only about a week later that Scott's mother, Vera, received the first call. "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" the voice on the phone said. When Vera said that she was, the caller simply added, "I've got her," and then hung up. It was the first such call that Scott's parents received, but it wouldn't be the last. Though police installed a voice recorder at their residence, they were never able to trace the calls, as the caller never stayed on the line for more than a short time. Shortly after the mysterious calls began, Scott's father approached the Santa Ana Register asking them to run a story about his missing daughter. The story ran on June 12, 1980, and the same day that Pat Riley, the paper's editor, received an anonymous phone call from someone claiming to be Dorothy Scott's killer. "She was my love," the caller said. "I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else, so I killed her." The caller provided details that hadn't been included in the newspaper story, such as the color of Scott's scarf and the fact that her coworker had been treated for a black widow bite that evening. The caller also claimed that Scott had called him that night from the hospital, though Pam had insisted that Scott had never left her side that evening. As far as anyone in her life was aware, Dorothy Scott had no serious boyfriend at the time of her death. Still, police believe that the man who called the Santa Ana Register was most likely her killer. During all this time, Scott was still missing. It was nearly 2 months later, on August 6, 1984, that construction workers would discover charred bones near Santa Ana Canyon Road. The bones included human and dog remains side by side. Authorities believe that they had been there for some time, as a brush fire had swept them through the area in 1982, and likely explained the charred condition of the bones. Though no cause of death was able to be established, a turquoise ring and watch were both found with the remains, and the bones were identified as Scott's through dental records. Though the strange calls to Scott's family stopped in April of 1984, they resumed after Scott's remains were found in August. In spite of the killer's taunting calls, Scott's murder remains unsolved to this day. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please remember to do so now, Please make sure to share and like the video as well. Email your scary stories to the email in the description box below. Till we meet again.